When Fort Rivenhall fell, everyone thought the fight was over, until the mechanic climbed into the last gunship and took to the skies. What they didn't know? She wasn't just fixing engines. She used to command them. They say the sky went quiet that morning, not because the battle had ended, but because no one knew what, if anything, would rise from the ashes. Fort Rivenhall lay shattered. Twisted steel, burned-out transports, blood on concrete that the rain couldn't wash away. Radios hissed with static. The wounded sat slumped against blown-out walls, their eyes blank, their bandages soaked through. And then came the voice. Any certified Viper pilots left? General Trask's voice cut through the smoke, sharp and tired. No one moved. No one needed to. We all knew the answer. Dead. Wounded. Gone. The flight roster was a graveyard. I didn't say a word. I just stood up. There was a wrench in my hand. Always was. I dropped it beside the torn-open engine I'd been patching since before the shelling began, wiped my hands on the rag clipped to my belt, and walked toward Gunship 22. The last airworthy Viper. Boots crunched over glass and gravel. Someone whispered, "Isn't that the mechanic?" They didn't stop me. They didn't dare. Because something in the way I walked, calm, precise, like I wasn't guessing, made them hesitate. General Trask took a step forward, then froze. Recognition flickered across his face. Not from paperwork. From memory. Real memory. The kind of knowing that doesn't fade. No one had ever asked why a technician could strip a targeting system blindfolded. Why I knew every flight path, every fail-safe, every soft click a Viper made before she broke. No one had to ask now. I climbed into the cockpit like I'd never left it. Everything came back. The feel of the throttle. The weight of the stick. The hum of systems coming online, not as machines, but as living things. I didn't flinch. I didn't wait. I flew. And from below, as the hangar filled with dust and awe, I could feel them all staring up, wondering who the hell I really was. The Viper rose smooth and clean, cutting through the smoke as if it had been waiting for me all along. The world below fell away. Stunned faces, wrecked vehicles, and shattered command posts turned into fading outlines on the ground. Up here, things made sense. Up here, it was just me and the machine. I banked east over the ridge. My fingers moved without thought. Weapons check, targeting systems online, radar sweeping the valley. No co-pilot. No chatter. Just me. And silence. Beautiful, focused silence. But the enemy wasn't silent. They were regrouping at Grid 6, a deep gully just beyond the tree line. I knew they'd be there. That's what I would have done in their place. Bottleneck the survivors. Crush the base before reinforcements arrived. I didn't wait. The first salvo streaked from the rails, 4 precision-guided rockets arcing into the center of their armored column. The explosions hit like thunderclaps. Secondary detonations followed. Fuel, ammo, something big. A wave of fire lit the trees in orange and black. They never saw it coming. Their comms lit up, panicked and raw. I listened, translating fragments through the encrypted band. They thought it was an allied strike team. They were wrong. There was only me. I rolled left, hard and fast, dropping into a low pass just above the treetops. Machine gun fire chased me, wild and desperate. I looped, flared, came back in from the west with guns hot. Second run, clean. 2 transport trucks. 1 anti-air platform. Gone. Behind me, Fort Rivenhall watched a ghost fly. To them, I was the mechanic. The one who logged parts, who never spoke up during mission briefs, who spent more time inside engine bays than talking to people. They didn't know my name before today. Now, they said it like a question. Who is she? Not pilot. Not officer. Not command. Just her. The one who flew when no one else could. The one who didn't need permission. I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there because no one else was. And because some part of me, some old, buried part, had always known this day would come. Because once, I was Captain Ray Voss of the 141st, until they tore my name off the books and called me a liability. And now I was back. Not for revenge. Not for redemption. For survival. I stayed low after the second run, skimming the treetops, listening to the chatter from both sides. Our broken lines, their regrouping squads. The enemy was disoriented, confused. They'd planned for wounded. For surrender. Not for air superiority. They'd written us off. Just like command wrote me off. They called it reflex lag, Back then, a bureaucratic label dressed up to sound scientific. Said I hesitated. Said I couldn't be trusted under fire. They ignored the context. The mission. The civilian convoy that got between us and the target. I didn't pull the trigger. I made the call they didn't want to explain in after-action reports. So they grounded me, took my wings, stripped my rank, reassigned me to Fort Rivenhall under a technician's ID. I didn't argue, didn't beg. I just did the one thing no one expects from a pilot. I got quiet. I learned every inch of those machines, from turbine compressor to targeting array. I made sure the others got to fly, even if they never noticed the work it took to keep their birds in the air. And now those same men were bleeding in the dirt. I pulled into a climb, circled high over the valley, and opened the comms to base. Rivenhall, this is Ghost Viper, I said. Enemy armor cluster at grid 6 has been neutralized. East flank collapsing. Awaiting further tasking. The reply came slower than I expected. Ghost Viper, say again? It was General Trask himself. I could hear the disbelief in his voice, the weight of everything shifting. Grid 6. Neutralized, I repeated. I'm not done yet. A pause. Then, understood. Tasking in progress. I didn't need their permission, but I had it now. Down below, the survivors were rallying. I saw medics dragging the wounded toward makeshift cover. Infantry moving to secure the breach. A few of them even looked up and raised their fists toward the sky. They still didn't know who I was. Didn't need to. The Viper and I moved as one, Predator and Storm. I'd earned this control through more flight hours than most of them would see in a lifetime. I'd flown missions so deep they weren't given names. Only coordinates. Now, the only thing that mattered was keeping the last of them alive until sunrise. And I would. Because this time, they weren't going to forget me. The night fell faster than I expected. Smoke from the ridges choked the last of the daylight, and what the sun couldn't hide, the ash did. Down below, the base was trying to stand on broken legs. Radios flickering back to life, stretchers being laid out, engineers throwing cables together like sutures on a dying patient. And still I flew. The enemy hadn't quit. Not yet. They were reforming near the southern tree line, confident that what they'd seen was a fluke. A rogue chopper. A lucky pilot. They still believed they had time. That our defenses had only stalled, not turned. They were wrong. I angled the Viper down into a run just over the treetops, sensors pinging off metal and movement. Light armor. 2 mortar crews. 1 command vehicle. All trying to re-establish lines before dawn. I took my time. Not out of hesitation, out of precision. One burst from the chin, gun tore through the mortars. Another strafing pass shredded the lead APC. And the command truck? I watched it lurch into a ditch, the soldiers inside scrambling into brush before the second rocket bloomed fire across their escape. Each hit was measured. Clean. Tactical. I wasn't here to show off. I was here to finish what everyone else thought impossible. Ray, do you copy? The voice came soft, hesitant, familiar. It took me a moment to recognize it. Trask. No. Major Elon Rourke. Intel. I blinked, surprised. I hadn't heard that voice since before the discharge. I knew it was you, she said. I told them. The way you fly, the way you move, there's no one else it could be. I said nothing. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. I exhaled into the mask, not angry, just tired. Because no one was listening back then. Not even you. There was a long pause. Then, her voice again, quieter. Well, we're listening now. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. I circled back toward the base as the final fires burned low behind me. The enemy had broken formation. The valley was ours again, for now. And somewhere in the heart of Fort Rivenhall, people had started whispering my name. Not the old one. Not Captain. Not Redbird. But the one I'd carried in silence, through years of turning wrenches and hiding flight scars. Ghost Viper. And the skies knew me again. I touched down just after 0200. Smooth as glass. The kind of landing they drill into you at flight school until it becomes second nature. The kind you never forget, even when they take your wings. The Viper's turbines spooled down, coughing dust across the broken tarmac. I went through every shutdown step by muscle memory. Hands calm, breathing steady, like I hadn't just flown solo through a nightmare. No one came to meet me at first. Probably didn't know if they were allowed to. I wasn't on any flight plan. I wasn't even on the roster anymore. I sat there in the dark, inside that humming cockpit, for maybe a full minute before I unbuckled. The silence pressed down, not uncomfortable, just full. Full of questions no one wanted to ask. Then the door creaked open. General Trask stood at the edge of the pad, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. Not angry, not proud, just seeing me. Really seeing me. Pilot's logs in the panel, I said, climbing down. Confirmed 17 targets neutralized. East and south sectors cleared. I brushed soot from my sleeves, started walking past him. Ray, he said. I stopped. You could have run. I didn't. You didn't have to fly. I did. Trask let out a breath like he'd been holding it all day. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner, like the weight of command had worn him hollow. Where'd you learn to fly like that? He asked. I met his eyes. Same place everyone else did. I just didn't stop when they told me to. Behind him, soldiers were emerging from bunkers, stretchers, makeshift shelters. Faces turned toward the pad. Toward me. Some looked stunned. Others looked like they'd just remembered something important. One of them, a young infantryman I'd passed a dozen times in the motor pool, stepped into attention and saluted. Not out of protocol. Out of respect. More followed. It wasn't a ceremony. There were no flags, no music, no camera drones. Just raw, unfiltered realization. The mechanic they never noticed had flown the mission that saved them all. And now, they didn't know what to call me. Pilot? Captain? Ghost? I didn't care. I walked straight back to Bay 3, picked up the wrench I'd dropped 12 hours ago, and clipped it back to my belt. Still covered in oil. Still useful. Still me. Bay 3 was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes after chaos. Not peace, but pause. The lull before the next storm. I went back to my bench. Tools still scattered where I'd left them. The torn fuel line from gunship 07 still sitting in its tray. No one else had touched it. They hadn't dared. I sat down, pulled my gloves back on, and got to work. Hands steady, motions familiar. There was comfort in repair. In things that made sense under pressure. Voices echoed from outside. Not panicked now. Not desperate. Just voices. People talking again. The living still alive. Is she even registered? Why didn't command tell us? Was she Black Ops? I thought she was just a mechanic. The speculation didn't bother me. Let them guess. The ones who needed answers would find them. The rest would tell stories. And stories, I'd learned, were more powerful than truth anyway. An hour later, someone stepped into the hangar. Light boots. Hesitant step. I didn't look up. Captain Voss. I kept working. Corporal. That's what my tag still says. You saved a lot of lives tonight. I finished tightening the housing clamp before replying. That's what flight's for. When I finally looked up, I saw a lieutenant. Young, maybe 23, shaken but intact. His uniform was bloodstained. Not his own. He held something out to me, a flight badge. Mine. The one they made me surrender years ago. I found it in the personnel archive, he said. I think someone buried it. Literally. Took me half a night to dig it up. I didn't take it. Thanks, I said. But I don't need it to fly. He held it for a moment longer, then nodded, sliding it onto the workbench beside my tools like it belonged there. You coming to the debrief? I already made mine. He smiled faintly, unsure if I was serious, then turned and walked out. When he was gone, I stared at the badge. The weight of it. Not in metal. In memory. I hadn't flown for glory, or payback, or a second chance at rank. I'd flown because someone had to, and I was still the only one who could. The next morning, the briefing room was packed. I wasn't invited. That didn't bother me. I stood outside the door with a coffee in hand, listening through the thin metal walls. Trask was in there, voice steady, going over impact estimates, damage reports, flight logs, and me. Unknown pilot in gunship 22 executed surgical strikes across enemy formations at grids 4, 6, and 9, he said. Precision was exceptional. Confirmed neutralization of multiple high-value targets. 0 friendly fire. 0 casualties during engagement. He let the silence stretch. Then, as of 0500 hours, we have confirmed identification. Papers shuffled. Someone asked, who was it? Another voice, someone skeptical, muttered. Wait, you're saying the mechanic? Yes, Trask cut in. Corporal Ray Voss. Formerly captain. Reassigned after an incident command classified as disciplinary, but which, upon review, shows significant irregularities. I closed my eyes. There it was. They were digging. Again. In light of last night's operation, he continued, I've requested a full review of her discharge and reclassification. Effective immediately, she is to be reinstated under emergency authority. A ripple of murmurs followed. I didn't need to hear more. I turned and walked back to the hangar. Let them talk. Let them review and argue and weigh paperwork against reality. I'd already made my statement. It wasn't written. It was flown. Back at Bay 3, the Viper was still parked on the pad, scorched and silent, but intact. I approached her slowly, hand tracing the soot-streaked hull. I whispered, we're not ghosts anymore. And I meant it. I could feel the shift around the base. Not in orders, but in eyes. Soldiers who used to brush past me in corridors now nodded as we crossed paths. One or two even stood a little straighter when I passed. Respect isn't given. It's earned, usually the hard way. And sometimes, when you've been buried long enough, the only way to be seen again is to rise with fire in your wake. 2 days later, I was summoned. Not to a hearing. Not to a disciplinary board. To Trask's office. His aide led me through the admin building like I didn't know every crack in its tile floors. I did. I'd walked these halls for years like a shadow, never invited through the doors that now stood open. General Trask sat behind a desk cluttered with reports. He didn't offer a seat. I didn't ask for one. Your file makes for interesting reading, he said, flipping through a thick folder. 2 years classified flight ops. 1 mission labeled inconclusive. And then, he looked up. Nothing. Your people buried me, I said. Trask nodded, unbothered. That's how command handles discomfort. But I read the mission report, and I watched your cockpit feed from the other night. A pause. You never stopped being a pilot. No, I agreed. I just stopped being convenient. He closed the folder, set it aside. I've pushed your reinstatement. Command hasn't fought it. They won't, I said. Not after what they saw. He leaned back. You don't seem angry. I smiled without humor. I'm tired. That's different. He tapped the desk. There's talk of assigning you a squad. Training younger pilots. No. That caught him off guard. I'm not ready to teach yet, I added. They still see a ghost. Let that settle before you turn me into a legend. He nodded slowly. Then what do you want? I thought about it. Not glory. Not rank. Those were things you chased when you still believed they mattered. But there was something else. Let me keep the Viper operational. I'll fly when needed. I'll fix what breaks. And when the next storm hits, I'll be ready. He regarded me for a long moment. Then stood. Then it settled. I left the office without a salute. Not from disrespect, but because I wasn't sure which version of me he'd been talking to, Ray the pilot or Ray the mechanic. Maybe now they were the same. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Fort Rivenhall was healing. The wreckage still smoldered in places, but the scent of smoke was fading. Engineers worked around the clock rebuilding the perimeter. Medical tents overflowed with the wounded, but they were alive. That mattered more than anything. And me? I was back in Bay 3, same coveralls, same tools, same rag tucked into my belt. But it wasn't the same. Not really. Every time I walked across the tarmac now, heads turned. Not all the way, just enough. A nod here. A subtle pause there. Soldiers gave space they never used to. Officers addressed me without condescension. Pilots, real ones, started asking quiet questions when no one else was listening. How did you know the valley angle would give you cover? What's your tactic for cutting through heat bloom in low light? Did you really fly blackout ops during the siege of Dorsey? I never answered with much. Sometimes just a shrug. Sometimes silence. Let them wonder. The Viper stayed parked nearby, refitted and ready. Not officially reassigned. Not claimed by any squadron. Just mine. Unofficial things have a way of becoming permanent when no one argues. One afternoon, a group of rookies from Flight School South came through on a base tour. I caught one staring at me. Young, green, eyes wide with recognition, but unsure why. You're the one who flew that night, he said softly. I didn't reply. Some of the guys say it wasn't real. That no pilot could do what you did. I raised an eyebrow. Then let them believe that. He looked confused. Why? I leaned in, lowered my voice. Because if they don't believe it's possible, they'll never try to match it. And that gives me the edge next time. He grinned. Not mockery, respect. It wasn't about proving I was good anymore. It was about staying sharp, staying alive, staying useful. I still moved like a mechanic, still kept to the edges. But now they knew. When things fell apart, when plans failed and backup never came, I was the one you'd want in the air. No rank. No fanfare. Just results. Weeks passed. The fires were out. The dead were named. The base slowly breathed again. But the story never stopped. They started calling it the night the sky returned. Pilots told it with reverence. Grunts whispered it over rations. Some added details that never happened. Others stripped it down to only one truth. When everyone else was gone, she flew. They didn't always remember my name. Didn't need to. Ghost Viper was enough. One morning, a sealed envelope showed up on my bunk. Official orders, deployment classified. No return window. No explanation. But I knew what it meant. They needed me again. Somewhere beyond the ridgelines and maps. Another base was preparing for the worst. Another roster was thinning. Another war was twisting reality into desperation. And somewhere out there, another sky had gone quiet. I packed light. Just the essentials. Wiped down my tools. Left the rag behind. Oil-stained and worn. Tucked onto the corner of the workbench where it belonged. As I walked to the pad, the same young lieutenant from before caught up to me. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Where I'm needed." "You'll come back?" I looked at him. Honest. Hopeful. "I never really left," I said. The Viper waited, blades gleaming in the early sun, a predator coiled and patient. I climbed in without ceremony. Ran the checklist. Ignited the engines. The sound rolled across Fort Rivenhall like a heartbeat, not of war, but of warning. The sky knew me now. And so did they. As the ground pulled away and the wind took hold, I felt it again. That fire in the blood. That calm that comes only with absolute certainty in what you are. Not a mechanic. Not a captain. Not a ghost. Just a pilot. And when the next silence came, they would remember. Because when the world burns, someone still has to fly through the smoke. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.